Duende is a creature somewhat like a human from Iberian, Latin American, and Filipino folklore. In the Hispanic folklore of Mexico and the American Southwest, Duendes are known as gnome-like creatures who live inside the walls of homes. In some Costa Rican folklore, they are considered to be the angels that stayed neutral during the war in heaven, being sent denied from heaven and hell.
It's a story my mother told me in the past. An experience my grandfather made with El Duende when he used to teach in rural zones. El Duende is widely known throughout South America as a mischievous or evil spirit. There were rumors that a certain 10-year-old boy was stealing jewelry from the neighborhood. A rather hard feat to achieve by a 10-year-old boy, but the neighbors didn't thought much about it. Parents probably just took out the chancla and thought a beating was going to be enough. Apparently the parents had seen him playing and talking with himself repeatedly over the past. Since he was so young, lonely children tend to make imaginary friends. OK.JPEG. On a Semana Santa, people come together to pray and thank Jesus for his sacrifice. The kid goes that week on a night missing. The parents were terribly worried for his safety. The whole town mobilized search groups with hounds and whatnot. After 3 days they give up. The chances looked grim for the kid. 1 week later a person reported a strange sighting in the forest nearby. He claimed to have seen something similar to a person high in the tip of a pine. A rescue group was mobilized immediately and the lost kid was found dead. The state of the corpse was rather intriguing. My grandfather was there when the rescue team were on the process of recovering the body. He has many innumerable thorn scars all across his skin. He seems like he was dragged wildly through the bushes. Besides that, he had remarkably deeper wounds, claw marks and animal-like too. His eyes were wide open in horror and his hands were stiff in front of him, like when you instinctively want to shield yourself from an attack. My grandfather didn't mean disrespect, but that sight was shocking. He wanted some photos of the scene. It was one of those negative light cameras. There was no digital display like nowadays. Later, when inspecting the negative film, he noticed the body wasn't anywhere to be seen in the photos.
My mom grew up in Laredo, Texas, and she said they used to play baseball in an empty lot nearby. The lot was across from a cemetery, and in this lot was a small abandoned shack. She said after they were done playing one day she saw what she thought was a small child, pointing at her with its finger, curling it back as to signal her over. She looked closely and she swears it had a small hat and was much smaller than what she had originally thought. Fast forward years later and this conversation was brought up with my grandmother. She explained she had seen the same thing at the same place. My mom had never mentioned what she saw to her up until that day. Neither are superstitious or very gullible.
In 1932, a family residing in the town of Saragossa reported that a voice began manifesting itself from the stove burner, shouting a number of insults and laughing erratically at random intervals. After the reports continued, security agents, police, plumbers, carpenters, and masons came into the house to try to find the source of the voice, and in the process, tore up the floor and the walls to see if the voice was being carried by pipes. The group of investigators found nothing, and the voice actually manifested itself as they did their investigation. Police were able to establish contact with the entity. In one occasion, after being asked what he was, the entity replied with "I am not human." The voice continued to issue obscenities and blasphemies and death threats. Supposedly, some of these death threats were fulfilled, for several months, and, at wit's end, the authorities placed the blame on the family's gypsy maid, despite no evidence placed against her. The house was then forcibly cleared, and scheduled to be torn down. When laborers showed up the next day to begin tearing it down, the voice manifested for one last time, saying, "I am going to kill all the people in this fucking house, you fucking cowards. You hear me?" Before disappearing forever. The laborers insisted that a Catholic priest bless the house before they tore it down.
Today, the building that stands on the location of the old house is known as El Edificio Duende, the dwarf's building, in honor of the supposed dwarf of Zaragoza.
A duende, goblin, gnome is often referred in our culture-I'm Argentinian as some kind of ghost who likes to hide your shit. My friend's house has one of this fuckers. They are really annoying. I experienced a situation in his house that I couldn't really explain scientifically. Actually, that's why I believe in ghosts, though I don't believe in demons, skeletons, gods and shit.
Be 10, in Mexico at the time. Go to mom's hometown, called Acapulco. Hilly area, weather and rain is cold, rarely gets above 85 F. Be in grandma's house, kind of a bad house but it's all they had. It's like the pic except it's not colorful and it has no roof, and it has a kitchen built on it on the right side, with opening and no doors so anyone walking by could see us cooking. I had heard of Duende before and I had always imagined them as gnomes before this. Be chilling with family until it's time to go to sleep. Sleep time. Everyone is getting ready, setting down their blankets, no beds. Lights out. Hear a drum being played, don't care, I'm teared. Drum gets closer, still don't care. Fall asleep. This is where it starts, the most realistic dream I ever had, almost like if it was a lucid dream. Wake up and dream, no one is there. Go get some bread for breakfast as I think they're there. House seems more broken down than it is. It's humid, like 90 to 95 F. Walk in the kitchen and see these 3 to 4 feet tall people sitting down, no nomad, never had seen these shits before. Could have never imagined them, they don't have human faces, long nose, medium but dirty hair, they have clothes but I forgot how they looked. They start laughing, I bolt out. The opening in the kitchen is covered by plants. They ain't a from roof. Go out and run. Wake up, no one around, terrified now. Everything looks exactly the same as dream but house isn't that broken. Run to kitchen ready to fight. Family is there, they look at me like WTF. Tell them a dream, they tell me it was a dream and that it was just my head. It was the realest shit ever though. Tell them with drums, now they actually tell me a bit about them. Apparently the sound comes by from time to time and it selects people who want to hear it. Pretty bullshit to me but the dream was just so realistic. I've had lucid dreams before but nothing like that.
Had a duende fuck with me at my office here in Mexico, Hermosillo, Sonora. Have my laptop bag on the floor under my desk. Have a USB cable to charge my headphones, mostly leave it plugged into my dock all day. Wanted to charge headphones, cable gone. Look for it in the trash, my drawers, under the desk, it's nowhere. A couple of days pass, I am alone at the office and say to the Duendes, okay guys, enough, just return it and el chiquitos, you gotta talk to them like they were kids and in a nice tone. Next day, work all day, time to leave comes, I grab my laptop bag, like I do every day, and there is the USB cable wrapped around the strap, and I don't mean on the bag or on the strap, but wrapped around it. Say muchas gracias and have never had another thing go missing there again.
In Puebla, Mexico. Saw a couple of duendes playing by a river when walking home late at night, granted I was fairly intoxicated. From what I could see they looked like children with very graceful movements, almost like ballet dancing, and superhuman levels of speed. They even had the ability to jump across the entire river, which was at least a good 20-30 feet wide. I stared for a bit, and after a little while one caught sight of me on the bridge looking down on them and they took off out of sight. Spoke to my grandparents and parents the next morning and basically got told that seeing Duendes kids in that area playing at night is fairly common in our pueblo.
There's a lot of stories about Duendes here in Chile, especially in the countryside. I live in a small cottage in the south and I used to listen stories about them all the time when I was a kid. If you are walking alone at night you are fucked, Duendes will get you lost. Also, if they start living in your house they will hide things just to fuck with you. I think that they are interdimensional beings, not sure though, but I know they can appear and disappear instantly.
One of my relatives once saw some duendes that were screaming around behind a fence in a rural part of town and scaring the cows that a farmer was driving them back to the farm. He said they were green and were just yelling around making noise, just messing with them until they just went into the high grass and disappeared. Another account of a friend of my father told a story that his car got stuck in the middle of a dirt road in the middle of the dry woods and a bunch of small guys wearing typical poor people's clothes with beer and all just came around and asked if they could help him, with native rural slang and all. He accepted their help. They helped him change the tires while grabbing the car. Then in the end he was thankful and wanted to take a pic since it was such a weird occasion having a bunch of dwarves come out of nowhere to help him out. This far he didn't think they were gnomes or anything, I guess, but after he revealed the pic, where he was being held by the dudes, he was just leaning there in the air with nothing to hold him. That was one of the weirdest stories I've ever heard of them, and I'm sure there's more, I just didn't ask. I would really like to see that pic, but I'm sure it wouldn't tell more about the veracity of it.
In all seriousness, gnomes are probably common in Mexico. They're called duendes and many believe them to be the spirits of dead children, but that might depend on the one you're encountering. Most don't see them as malicious, mostly just mischievous. My cousin from D.F., Mexico City, used to tell me about them a lot. He'd hear them on his roof, and he'd see them running around his yard. One time he told us about how he actually spoke to, I'm not sure if it was actually a duende or just a spirit, a little man, 3-foot man who was dressed like a Zapatero soldier, and how he told him, I am a soldier who fought a war far away. I ask you to let me stay here, and my cousin, being sleepy and having to take a piss, told him to fuck off, and he did.
I haven't seen one, but here in Mexico rural zones argue that they are quite common to be spotted by. My roomie's father used to live in a small town north of Mexico. He said that gnomes used to wake him up when he was younger and just stared at him until he got up and scolded them out. He described them as quite ugly but are childlike, annoying beings that are playful and so on. The other source I have is from a worker that lives in a small town near the Gulf of Mexico. The guy works for my family. Every time I am with him, fishing or getting coconuts from the palms, he tells me stories of sightings the town and him have made with creatures like that, and other folklore. In few words, they are really common to be seen in rural sides of Mexico, but also they are more religious and superstitious like.
Interesting post. Up, I don't even know how to tell this story, because it sounds so ridiculous. But it is genuinely one of the most frightening experiences of my life. Every time I think about it, I get cold chills. I was probably 7 or 8 years old, sitting on my bedroom floor, playing with Lego. It was morning and I had the window blinds open, so the room was filled with sunlight. I distinctly remember looking at the dark space under my bed, and thinking to myself how silly I was to be afraid of something being under there at night. I'm legit having a hard time typing this because the memory is so clear and horrific. Anyways, there I was playing with Legos and feeling very bold and grown up in daylight. I called out in a mocking tone, come out, wherever you are." And then a grinning, devilish face popped out from under my bed. I will never forget that face. The twisted little face of an old man with red skin and a rough white beard, grinning an inhuman grin. My reaction was just like the one in the video, instant terror. I am proud to say that I kicked that face with all my might as I scrambled to my feet. But he still smiled. I rushed out of my room shrieking, into my mom's arms. When I told her what happened, she looked worried and said it was a dream. But I knew it wasn't, because when I went back in the room, the Lego house I had been building was still there, half finished. I think she knew it wasn't a dream, either. Probably sounds like a retarded creepypasta, but it's a real memory. I understand it could have actually been a dream somehow, or my mind playing tricks, but I really don't believe it was. I think I asked to see something and got exactly what I wanted. I don't necessarily believe in gnomes, but I can certainly believe that something took on the form of gnome to frighten me as a child for my arrogance.
Okay, I'll green text this because too fudging lazy to write this one out too. B May. B14. B 2017. At Grandma's house in Guam. House is old, been around before WW2. House located on the lining of the Bunas. Too fucking hot and humid. 4 days into trip. Go to shower because sweating fudging bullets in the heat. In shower there's an overhead vent fan thing that has an opening to roof. In middle of shower hear vent thing make a noise, It's not electric, mind you, it's literally just a hole with a vent cover to the roof. Look up because sound. See fucking eyes staring right back at me. Lock gaze with what I assume to be Duende. Mind you, a cat can't get through this vent as it tapers off at the end of it. Paralyzed by fear. Stand there not moving a muscle, just looking back into this black mass with nothing except eyes. Watch it immediately dart up and out of vent after I practically shit bricks. On absolute fudging edge. Tell Dad about Duende. Dad tells me stories about how when he used to live there in the middle of the night he'd hear all of the plates and silverware randomly shake violently. Almost don't believe it? Ask Aunt since she's here with Dad on trip about anything weird that used to happen in the house. Gives me same exact story, but then goes on to talk about how when my grandfather was still alive and my dad was still a very small child and my aunt was about 10 or so, in the midst of the night they heard the back door open. Grandpa, being WW2 survivor and toughest mother fudger I've heard in my existence, goes to check what the fuck it was because Chad Grandpa and with Grandma in room waiting for his return. Apparently Grandpa comes back looking awestruck. Grandma asks what happened and if it was an intruder. Turns out Duendes were at back door fucking around with it. After this Grandpa heavily respected them. At some point Grandpa and Dad were barbecuing in backyard right across Buna's lining at night. Grandpa throws a large piece of steak in lining. Dad sees and asks why he did that. Grandpa says to respect the spirits of the Bunas. Dad watches a black mass of what almost looks like an arm protrude out of the thicket of the trees. Takes piece of fucking meat. Dad scared shitless. Grandpa laughs. Dad never journeys near edge of Bunas again. Safe to say I wouldn't have believed my dad if the bathroom experience never happened. Anyway, I'ma go play video games, then check on candle once it hits 12 or so. I don't want to disturb spirit and I'll let it be.
One told us a story of when my grandma had an encounter with a doomed grandma recently gave birth to one of my many uncles. She's in her living room relaxing. Front door is a little open to let in a breeze. Baby bundled up, sleeping on the couch. Grandma appeared. Something opened eyes to see this little blue fucker going to snatch baby. Grandma reaches over and grabs him out of the little Dune's arms and runs to bedroom, screaming loud, though the Dune keeps banging on it, yelling that it wants my uncle.
This is one my mom told me about, an encounter my grandpa had with a duende, Mexican gnome-type creature, near their family home. They live on a mountain and it's not really accessible by car. You have to be careful when driving up there and have a truck or park kind of close and hike the rest of the way. Or travel with a horse. The day that my grandpa had the encounter it was raining and he had to go on horseback to where they keep their goats. My grandparents live pretty far away from an actual village and where they keep the goats is even further than that, so it's rare to see people out there. But when my granda was coming back from securing the goats he ran into a kid on the trail. It was raining pretty hard and there is no reason for a kid to out there. He said his horse started freaking out and he didn't recognize the kid from the village or anywhere by, but he offered a ride closer to town. He got the kid on the back of the horse and told him to hold on. He said the kid was unnaturally cold. He could feel how cold the kid was through his jacket. The horse was still agitated and it must have bucked or something, and my grandpa said the kid fell off, and when he turned around to see where the kid fell it was just gone. He looked for a little and there was no sign the kid. He later asked around and no one knew of any missing kids. I have a few stories if anyone is interested. Here is another 2 stories my mom told me about duendes. She said that the duendes would make little wooden fences in the middle of the woods and people would tell you not to mess with them. One time her and her brothers were exploring and found one of these little wood fences, and her brother started kicking and knocking down the fence, and almost as soon as he did that rocks started getting thrown at them from different directions and they couldn't see any more throwing them, and it was as if the rocks were getting thrown from the tress. Another story she told me was about her brother who used to be really violent. He would beat up all his siblings and was just a bully. One day he was drunk and he was going to walk to the nearest store and buy more alcohol. Everyone got in an argument with because they didn't want him going, but he was really violent so they couldn't stop him. He left and a little while later came back running and crying. He said that in his way to the store this little person or kid tripped him and he turned around thinking it was one of his brothers and thinking he was about to beat one of them up, but it wasn't anyone he knew, and what scared him was that when he would start getting too close to it, the thing would flash its teeth, and it had what he described as dog teeth. The thing followed him for a while, messing with by trying to make him fall, and when he would turn around to hit it, the creature would get in an aggressive stance and show its teeth. This is last one I have about duendes. This one happened in the same area. Like I wrote earlier, my grandparents' house was on a mountain, so people would park down the mountain near a gravel road and then walk the rest of the way to visit. On the walk there is a large pond, some crop fields, a house, and not much else. One night some family members were walking back to their cars so they could go back into town. It was 2 adult women and a child. During a certain season it gets foggy near the pond and the lower elevations. As they were walking in the fog, the child they were with just started running. The women were screaming for him to stop because visibility was low and they were scared that he could fall in the pond. They lost sight of him, and when they finally found him they started screaming at him and scolding him, and they were asking him why the hell did he run. He was crying and he said he didn't want to run, but the 2 little boys grabbed his arms and were pulling him and making him run. This story was told to me by one of the women that was there and by the kid. They told it to me as we were walking by where it happened, but thankfully during the day. It's crazy how people over there talk about spooky shit like it's a normal thing. Oh, and when they told me the story I asked the kid what he remembered, and he said all he remembers is 2 kids pulling him away from his family and they were telling him to fly.
Flip here. Duende stories are also common in the Philippines, even had a popular movie back in the 80s. They appear in different colored clothes depending if they are kind or somewhat evil. Here's my experience. Our house had 2 floors before. First floor had the dining room and bathrooms, while the second floor had the bedrooms and TV rooms. Was in high school back then, had to wake up early for something I can't remember. Going down groggily to staircase, past the dining room onto the sink to wash my face. As I passed the dining room, 2 duendes were climbing onto the dining table from a chair, like one was standing on the chair, with clenched hands as the other duende was stepping on the other one's hands to reach the table. Still half asleep at that time, so I shrugged it off as meh. When I realized what I just saw, I took a look at the table again and no one's there, but the chair was in the exact place where the duendes were standing. Parents made sure that chairs are on the side of the wall after meals, and this was the only chair that was on the table at that time. Also noticed a fruit basket on the table. Did not even bother asking my mom when she woke up if a fruit was missing.
Little Duende fell in love with my great-grandaunt once. Back then when she was a 20-ish looker, sometimes at night she felt like some tiny hounds were grabbing her butt. Her father didn't like that, so she waited while she was sleeping on a hammock and waited for the duende to come, caught the pervert in a sack and beat him against the tree, making sure not to kill him, just to annoy him, so that his duende family won't come seeking revenge. Pervert duende learned his lesson, and my great-grandaunt Luz was never molested again.
Well, I was 4 or 5 at the time, and I was playing hide and seek with the children my mom used babysit. I decided to hide at the side of my bed, which was right next to a wall. While I was hiding, I had one of my legs under the bed. At this moment I felt great pain in my leg. It felt as if someone had grabbed it in a very forceful way. I remember looking under the bed right away and seeing nothing, but still feeling that force in my leg, so I kicked in the direction I felt the force was coming from. As soon as I did that, I felt relief in my leg and quickly ran away. I ran to my dad and told him what had happened, but he said it was just my imagination. As soon as he told me that, I showed him my leg, which had a clear mark which looked like a really small hand had made it. We never really spoke about it until years later when I asked him if he remembered what had happened to me. That's when my dad explained to me what might have been what attacked me. My family comes from Mexico, where the belief of duendes or gnomes elves is very strong. Duendes are small humanoid creatures that enjoy the company of children, but are very aggressive towards them. They kidnap these children and force them to become their playmates, and if these children don't meet their standards, they brutally hurt them. My dad believes that maybe one of these duendes was trying to get me, but failed when I managed to fight back and escape. He states that the reason I didn't see it was because I was a child with a strong soul that was not meant to be taken by this thing, therefore I wasn't granted with the ability to see this thing. I'm not sure I believe in everything my dad told me, but I do know what happened to me is a thing I will never forget. This experience has made me curious. Has anyone else gone through something similar or knows more about these duendes?
El Duende. My uncle has a story with it. Be my uncle in Colombia. My family lives in a rural town up in the mountains about 2 hours away from the major city. My uncle is about 9 and walking back from school or something. Suddenly he sees a little girl and she tells him to follow her. He doesn't even hesitate, he says sure. He follows her for 5 minutes and then she disappears. He thought it was weird, but then he looks at his watch and realizes it is 9 hours later and he had no idea where the fuck he was. Uncle didn't find his way back until the next day when he eventually found a road and got help. Till this day he says everything about that story is true. My grandma, aunts, and uncles were apparently worried as shit since he suddenly disappeared.
Bolivian here, there is one entity that blocks memories. It's called El Duende, with several stories and witnesses. However, the sightings stopped long ago, around the 90s. It's said it still wanders on the woods today. People that lives in zones that are deep in the forest still believe in him. My mother is a Teenus, sort of. Well, description here. It's a small dude, dwarf size, covered in a white blanket, from neck to feet. He has a huge hat covering his head, so his face is unknown. This little guy is childlike. He likes to play small pranks on adults, like, to farmers, do some ribbons to their horses, and move random objects of their usual place. It gets creepier when kids find this guy. He really likes them, so he takes them deep in forests, not really kidnapping. Usually they play together and become friends. At this point most parents think it's an imaginary friend, so they let it pass, and the problem is that the kids get missing for days. After that long time, kids return to their homes safely on their own, but with absolutely no memory of what happened. All they can remember is that they played with another child. Pick related, just no pause, thoughts BS. Now my mother's story. Home Alone, 1991, the woods are close by to the house. Was a baby, mother was busy with me but had to cook. She puts me on my bed for a moment. Turns around to attend kitchen but wants to be lovely to me and give a kiss. So the turns again. All this happened instantly. Put me down, turn, think about it for 1 second, and turn around to me again. Me, a 2-month-old baby, was around 10 MTS outside house, heading the woods, on the grass. Door widely open, was closed before, and not to say there's no fucking way a baby can move such long distance. They can't even move 10 centimeters at that age. She runs to pick me up, looks around but finds nothing. She says that she did listen to child laugh and steps outside most pick off her aid the night. She never dared to go outside. Dad returns from work and the thing leaves.
A part of my family are from the countryside, Campo, en Español. They all live in a small town near the mountains and a sort of plains combined with forest. My cousins were enjoying the countryside near the town. In the place where they hang out, there is, or was, a shitty old colonial house. Time goes by, and most of they are drunk and everyone is inside the house. The thing is that someone wants to take a shit or pee, they have to left the house, because the bathroom is outside. Tick related. One of the girls goes to the bathroom. When she was outside, everyone hears a scream and run outside.
My cousin, the one what was in the bathroom, is freaked because something opened the door while she was peeing. Describes the thing as an old midget man with a spooky smile, white beard. Everyone is freaked out because that's what we call a duende. They get inside the house. When everyone is inside, they start to hear steps outside. Suddenly no more steps and that thing is running towards the house now. They started hearing more of those things running outside the house. Absolute fear, and now they are praying. No one sleeps at night and never returns to that house.
There are bad duendes and good duendes. Both of them are annoying according to my culture. There are many ways to get rid of those things. They hate human poop, not kidding. So if a duende is haunting one of your people, you have to place it behind the victim's bed. The duende will smell it and will run away from your house. There is another way in case of the duende is copying all your movements. Duendes are also naughty witty. In this case you have to pretend that you are going to eat horse crap or any kind of crap. So the duende will eat that shit, then rage and never returns.
My dad told a story about how he heard duendes once when he was a child. His family lives on the edge of the town, after that it is all farms. And in their house they have a giant concrete tub called a pila that is used to hold water for washing dishes and taking showers, pick related. B dad. Dad is kid. He is sleeping. He shares his room with his 3 other brothers. One night he wakes up because he hears splashing coming from the pila. Sounds like voices are talking, but can't understand the language. He decides to investigate. Walking towards the door. The door is big, metal and rusty. Tries to open it but makes a loud clunk. His brothers wakes up and asks where he's going. Says he hears someone at the pila. Oldest brother opens the door slowly. Aims flashlight at pila. Sees nothing. They turn on all the lights and check the pila. Water everywhere and little wet footprints. Get spooked. They go back to their room and lock the door.
My grandma once told me that her cousin had seen a duende when she was young. She lived in Santiago, the poorest province in the country, and her cousin was in the backyard. Then he started running and screaming El Duende, El Duende. After that he was shocked and didn't talk for a week. When he calmed down, he told her family he saw a small guy, 1,20 cm more or less, with a coat and a big hat. He also said that the duende had a hand black and the other white, and it called him with the white hand.
B from Peru, Ayacucho. Be on the countryside playing with my brother. Something appears before us. His skin is like wood, hair thick but clean. His cloth is just bright and shiny, but his eyes are entirely black, and his height could not be more than 40 centimeters. My brother pulls me his way and takes my arm. The duende starts talking. Don't worry, kid. I'm just bored and want to play with you, while grinning. My brother shouts we don't want to and that he should leave. Duende takes out the green coins and says, I'm gonna bet these kiddo and each grants you a wish. My brother responds, and what could you possibly want from us? The duende starts, you will give me 3 bottles of wine that your parents keeps for each coin. We looked at each other and said deal as the game started. We played canicas. For those of you that don't know, you draw a circle and have to throw the balls on the circle with yours. We played and played until a wah resounded. Me and my brother look and saw our dog growling at the duende. He just stood up and said, well, I think we played enough for now, but someday we will settle this, kids. Took all the thing in his pockets and said, I will keep these until then. When my brother and I and the dog returned at the house, we found out 4 days had passed and all the village was looking for us. We told what happened and were beaten because we did not listen. This happens a lot here. Kids just disappear in the news and government says because of traffic of children and that bullshit, but in the Sierra we know it's because of duendes. They mess up your sense of time and space and lure you with their wealth. I have returned each year to that village on summer, but each time I just leave 3 wine bottles with my brother and ask to wait a little longer until we are old.
You guys are forgetting a big part of this duende thing. In my grandmother's hometown, a girl was out in the woods. That girl was really beautiful and had a really long hair. That's the perfect description for a girl that a duende would like, so the correct word here for what happened to that girl is in duendada. That consists in a sort of mental and health sickness. Every night she would seek to go to the woods and meet with the duende, and for that reason he was roped to her bed. What happened after that was that the duende would visit her every night and start braiding her hair. Not sure if that's the correct English word, but is basically doing sort of a ponytail. Her family would try to be with her all the night, but the duende is always watching her trough the window and singing some song. They eventually fell asleep and the duende would take the opportunity to mess up her hair again.
I think I'm late to the thread, but we'll post anyway. I'm from Colombia. It is right under Panama, at the left of Venezuela and above Ecuador. Do not confuse with Colombia, you ignorant fags. About duendes, my grandma from my mother's side told me that there exists a lot of supernatural beings that are part of the Mother Earth. Duendes are the playful and tricksters of the elementals, or something like that, and there are a lot of different kinds of duendes. The playful duendes are a sign of abundance of a household, and they are harmless, but they don't like to be seen by adults. The tricksters usually act accordingly how they are treated. Most tricksters take stuff and like to scare animals, but the bad ones can really harm people, especially if they have newborns. If I remember correctly, there was a kind of hermit duende that shared his knowledge and fortunes with the ones that thought were worthy. They had a drawback, but I can't.
I have a story of a duende that lived, we don't really know, in the old house of the grandparents of my father's side. They bought the house when that part of the city was the outskirts. They live right next to the house in the first floor of a 3-floor apartment. The old house and the apartment were connected through the small laundry space behind the big house, and they were owners of both until 2006, if I remember correctly. Before they moved to the apartment, my grandfather lived and died there. After he died, that apartment became like a storage room. When we were kids, me, my brother and my cousin were terrified of that apartment at night. We saw shadows moving and heard weird noises, but no adult believed us. That apartment will become important later. My grandma told that they had a duende in the house. She saw it 2 or 3 times and thought that she was seeing things until she told my grandpa one morning when they were talking that she thought that she saw a duende. My grandpa got pale and asked my grandma if she remembered what the duende looked like. She told him that it was a little guy, like 60 centimeters tall, with big chestnut-colored eyes. My grandpa got silent and told her that he also saw the duende, exactly as she had described it. Right after he said that, the little fucker laughed in the stairs, and both of them saw him just standing there. Then the duende went upstairs and disappeared in front of them. My father and my uncles grew up in that house, and then something went lost. They knew the duende had taken it. When I went there, I was 8 or 9 at the time. I needed to use the bathroom, so I went upstairs, did my stuff, and when I got out of the bathroom, I felt like I needed to look the hall. At the end of the hall, I saw the duende exiting my aunt's room. He then stopped, looked at me with surprise, and ran to my cousin's room to...
Garden gnomes are just the physical manifestation of the gnome meme. But deep down they symbolize earth creatures, small creatures that protect the woods and life. They're connected pretty deep to magic mushrooms as well. Ever wonder why in stories they live in mushroom houses? They're sort of the magic version of those woods that have interconnected roots between all the trees. They are much older than us, and some even call them our ancestors in a way, despite us being disconnected from them slightly. They're the old shepherds of this world.
The duendes are truly mysterious creatures. Some at A Knight's Tale shown that whether they were helpful, and others shown that they had malice. What do you think, dear viewer? Are some things better left unknown, or should man keep searching for things that go bump in the night? I encourage you to leave a comment below about Swedish until the clock strikes at midnight again.
Thank you for subscribing to Midnight Broadcast. More green text from XR Farming, a new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight at Central Time.